The champagne flute slipped from my hand in slow motion. Crystals shattered across marble tiles as I stared at the wedding announcement on my phone. My husband's face beaming next to hers, the woman he swore was just a colleague. The caption read, "Finally married my soulmate." 3 years. 3 years I'd been gone, rebuilding myself in Barcelona, and he'd waited exactly 6 months after our divorce to marry her. The metallic taste of shock flooded my mouth as I stood in my sun-drenched Spanish apartment, 8 months pregnant with another man's child, realizing that every promise Michael had made was a performance. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to Chicago, to the moment my perfect life started cracking at the seams. 8 months earlier, I was Sarah Mitchell, living in a brownstone in Lincoln Park with a husband who kissed me goodbye every morning and told me I was his everything. Michael worked in finance, pulling in serious money, while I managed our home and volunteered at the Art Institute. We'd been married 7 years, together for 10, and I genuinely believed we were solid. You know that feeling when you're so comfortable with someone that you stop really looking at them? That was us. I'd stopped seeing the late nights at the office as suspicious. I'd stopped questioning why his phone was always face down. I'd convinced myself that successful marriages required trust, not surveillance. How spectacularly wrong I was. Our brownstone was everything we'd dreamed of when we first toured it 5 years ago. 3 stories of exposed brick and original hardwood floors, with a chef's kitchen that Michael and I had renovated together. I could still remember us standing in the gutted space, covered in plaster dust, laughing as we argued about cabinet colors. He'd kissed me then, leaving a white smudge on my nose, and told me that growing old with me was the only thing he wanted. I'd believed him so completely that the memory didn't even feel real anymore, like it had happened to different people. My days followed a comfortable rhythm. Morning yoga in the sunroom overlooking our tiny backyard garden. Coffee from the French press Michael had bought me for our 5th anniversary. Then I'd plan my day, usually involving gallery visits, lunch with friends, or working on the fundraising committee for the Art Institute's education programs. My life looked perfect from the outside. Hell, it felt perfect from the inside, too. That's what made the betrayal so devastating when it finally revealed itself. I wasn't just losing a husband. I was losing the entire identity I'd built around being his wife. Looking back, there were signs I'd chosen to ignore. The way he'd started working out obsessively, suddenly caring about his appearance in ways he never had before. The new cologne, expensive and musky, that replaced his usual fresh scent. How he'd become protective of his phone, taking it with him even to the bathroom. The business trips that seemed to multiply, requiring weekend travel when they never had before. But when you're in love, truly in love, your brain performs incredible feats of rationalization. I told myself he was just stressed about work, that he was getting healthier, that I was being paranoid and insecure. Our friends thought we were relationship goals. Jessica and Tom, our closest couple friends, would often joke that they wanted what we had. "You guys never fight," Jessica would say with a hint of envy. "Tom and I can't go a week without some stupid argument." I'd smile and shrug, not wanting to seem smug, but secretly pleased that we appeared so harmonious. What I didn't understand then was that our lack of conflict wasn't a sign of compatibility. It was a sign of disconnection. Michael wasn't fighting with me because he was checked out, investing his emotional energy elsewhere. It started with a text message that popped up on his iPad while he was in the shower. We shared an Apple ID because, we were that couple who had nothing to hide. The preview read, "Last night was incredible. When can I see you again?" Signed with a heart emoji from someone named Vanessa. My stomach dropped like an elevator with cut cables. I sat on our bed, the Egyptian cotton sheets suddenly feeling suffocating, and told myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe it was meant for someone else. The shower turned off, and I could hear Michael humming something cheerful. I remember thinking how strange it was that my world was imploding while he was completely oblivious, washing away whatever he'd done the night before. I picked up the iPad with trembling hands, my finger hovering over the message. Part of me wanted to click it, to see the full conversation, to know the truth. But another part of me, the part that still desperately wanted to believe in the fairy tale, resisted. If I looked, I couldn't unknow what I'd find. The bathroom door would open any second. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my throat, my vision narrowing to just that message preview glowing on the screen. Last night was incredible. The words burned themselves into my retinas. What had made last night so incredible? Where had my husband been while I'd fallen asleep alone, assuming he was at the office working on that big merger he'd mentioned? When I confronted him, towel wrapped around his waist, water still dripping from his hair, he didn't even flinch. Vanessa? She's from the marketing team at work. We grabbed drinks after a late meeting. She's being dramatic. The way he said it, so casual, so dismissive, made me feel insane for even asking. He pulled me into a hug, got water all over my shirt, and kissed my forehead. You're the only woman I want, Sarah. Always have been, always will be. And I believed him. I know you're probably screaming at your screen right now, telling me to wake up. But when you love someone that deeply, your brain performs Olympic-level gymnastics to make their lies make sense. I wanted to believe him more than I wanted to face the truth. She probably has a crush on me, Michael continued, toweling off his hair with practiced nonchalance. You know how it is in corporate environments. Some of these young analysts get the wrong idea about mentorship. He moved around the bedroom, getting dressed for work, completely at ease. I watched him button his shirt, the same fingers that had touched me countless times now, potentially touching someone else. I'll talk to HR if it makes you uncomfortable. I can request not to work with her anymore. The offer seemed so reasonable, so considerate of my feelings. That's how good he was at this. He'd thought it through, had his response ready, knew exactly how to seem like the concerned husband protecting his marriage. No, I heard myself say. I trust you. I'm sorry I even brought it up. The words tasted like ash in my mouth, but I said them anyway. He smiled, kissed me on the lips this time, grabbed his briefcase, and headed out the door. Love you, babe. Dinner at 7? After he left, I sat on our bed for 20 minutes, staring at nothing. The morning light streamed through our bedroom windows, illuminating dust motes floating in the air. Everything looked the same as it had yesterday, but something fundamental had shifted. A seed of doubt had been planted, and no matter how much I tried to rationalize it away, I could feel it taking root in my chest, spreading through my ribcage like invasive vines. The gaslighting intensified over the next 2 weeks. I started checking his phone whenever he left it unattended, but everything was clean. Too clean. No messages from Vanessa. No suspicious calls. He'd clearly learned to cover his tracks. Meanwhile, he became extra attentive, bringing home flowers, planning date nights, telling me how lucky he was to have me. Have you ever felt your own sanity slipping through your fingers like sand? That's what those weeks felt like. I'd lie awake at night, listening to him breathe beside me, wondering if I was paranoid or if my instincts were trying to save me from something I couldn't yet see. He surprised me with a weekend trip to Door County, something we used to do when we were first dating. We stayed at a bed and breakfast with a view of Lake Michigan, walked along the shore, visited art galleries in the small towns. He held my hand, told me stories, made love to me with what seemed like genuine passion. I remember lying in that unfamiliar bed, his arm draped over me as he slept, feeling more alone than I'd ever felt in my life. How could someone fake intimacy so convincingly? How could he touch me, look into my eyes, whisper that he loved me, if it was all a lie? You seem distant lately, he said over breakfast at a cafe in Fish Creek. We were sharing Swedish pancakes, the morning sun making his eyes look golden. "Is everything okay?" The audacity of that question nearly made me laugh. He was the one being distant, being unfaithful, and yet he'd flipped it to make me the problem. "I'm fine," I said, forcing a smile. "Just tired, I guess." "You should take better care of yourself," he said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "Maybe book a spa day with Jessica. My treat." His concern seemed so genuine. His touch felt so familiar. How was I supposed to reconcile the man sitting across from me with the man who'd received that text message? I started to question everything. Had I imagined the text? Was I creating problems where none existed? My mother had always told me I had an overactive imagination. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was sabotaging my own happiness because some part of me didn't believe I deserved it. These thoughts circled in my mind like vultures, picking apart my confidence piece by piece. Then I found the credit card statement. He'd left his briefcase open in the home office, and there it was, tucked inside a folder marked tax documents. Charges I didn't recognize. The Peninsula Hotel, 4 different dates. Tiffany's, a purchase for $6,000 that I'd never received. Dinner reservations at Alinea, on nights he'd told me he was working late. My hands shook as I photographed every page with my phone. The claustrophobia of our beautiful home closed in around me. Those exposed brick walls we'd lovingly restored suddenly felt like a prison. The Edison bulb chandeliers cast shadows that looked like bars. I sat at his desk, my whole body shaking, scrolling through the photos I'd taken. June 15th, Peninsula Hotel, $600. That was the night he'd said he had to stay late for a conference call with Tokyo. June 22nd, Alinea, $850. He'd told me he was at a client dinner. July 3rd, Tiffany's, $6,000. My birthday was in March, our anniversary in November. Who had received that jewelry? The evidence was irrefutable, and yet part of me still wanted to find an innocent explanation. Maybe the hotel charges were for clients. Maybe the Tiffany's purchase was a surprise he was saving. Maybe. But the maybes were getting harder to believe. The foundation of trust we'd built our marriage on had been eroding for months, maybe years, and I'd been standing on it pretending not to notice the cracks. I heard his car pull into the driveway and quickly shoved my phone into my pocket. My heart raced as I closed the folder, trying to put everything back exactly as it had been. He couldn't know I'd found this. Not yet. I needed time to think, to plan, to figure out what to do with this information that was burning a hole through my chest. "Hey, babe," he called from the hallway, his voice cheerful, oblivious. "Want to order Thai food?" I walked out of the office, my face a carefully constructed mask of normalcy. "Sure," I said. "That sounds great." We sat on our couch, eating pad thai and watching a movie, and the entire time I was mentally calculating how to escape from a life I'd thought was real. I hired a private investigator named Rita Chen, recommended by a divorce attorney I'd consulted under the guise of helping a friend. Rita was in her 50s, with sharp eyes that missed nothing and a matter-of-fact delivery that somehow made the worst news bearable. "I'll need 2 weeks," she said, sitting across from me at a Starbucks in Wicker Park. "But Mrs. Mitchell, I have to tell you, in my experience, when wives come to me with evidence like this, I've never once found out they were wrong." Her words settled over me like a shroud. But there was also something liberating about them. I wasn't crazy. My instincts weren't betraying me. The man I'd trusted with everything was. Rita had the kind of presence that made you feel both comforted and concerned. She wore practical clothes, carried a worn leather bag, and had the air of someone who'd seen every variation of human deception. "I need you to be prepared for what I might find," she said, stirring her black coffee. "Most women think they want to know the truth, but the truth can be brutal. Are you sure you want to go down this road? I thought about that question. Once I knew for certain I couldn't unknow it. My marriage, already crumbling, would be definitively over. But living in this limbo, this constant state of doubt and suspicion, was killing me slowly. I need to know, I said. I need proof. I need to stop feeling like I'm losing my mind. Rita nodded, pulled out a contract, and walked me through her rates and services. I'll follow him, document his activities, get you photographs and recordings if possible. I'll also run a comprehensive background check, look into finances, check for any other red flags. You'd be surprised what I can find. She paused, looking at me with something that might have been sympathy. How are you holding up? The question caught me off guard. Nobody had asked me that in weeks. I'd been so busy pretending everything was fine, maintaining the facade of the happy wife, that I'd forgotten to check in with myself. I feel like I'm drowning, I admitted, and saying it out loud made tears spring to my eyes. Like I'm watching my life from outside my body. That's dissociation, Rita said matter-of-factly. It's a defense mechanism. Your brain is protecting you from trauma it can't fully process yet. It's normal, given what you're going through. She slid a tissue across the table. But Sarah, you need to take care of yourself. See a therapist. Talk to someone you trust. Don't isolate yourself while we're working on this. I took her advice and made an appointment with a therapist named Dr. Ellen Harris. Sitting in her office with its soft lighting and comfortable chairs, I finally let myself fall apart. I feel so stupid, I sobbed during that first session. How did I not see this? How could I be so blind? Dr. Harris, a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and a gentle voice, handed me a box of tissues. Sarah, you weren't blind. You trusted someone who presented themselves as trustworthy. That's not a character flaw. That's what we're supposed to do in healthy relationships. The betrayal is his failure, not yours. Over the next 2 weeks, I had 3 sessions with Dr. Harris while Rita worked her investigation. I'd leave therapy emotionally drained, then go home and play the dutiful wife, cooking dinner and asking Michael about his day. The compartmentalization required was exhausting, but it was also empowering. I was taking control of my narrative, gathering information, building a plan. I wasn't a passive victim anymore. I was an active agent in my own life. Rita worked fast. Within a week, she had photographs. Michael and Vanessa entering the 4 seasons. Michael and Vanessa holding hands at the lakefront. Michael and Vanessa kissing in the parking garage of his office building at 2 in the afternoon. But the smoking gun came on day 9. A recording from a private investigator who'd managed to get a table near theirs at Gibson's. Michael's voice, crystal clear. I'll tell Sarah soon. I just need to figure out the finances first. She'll be devastated. But Vanessa, you're my future. She's my past. The hum of the restaurant faded as I listened to him reduce our 10 years together to an inconvenient obstacle in his path to happiness. I was sitting in Rita's office when she played me the recording. Her office was small and cluttered, filled with file cabinets and surveillance equipment. The walls covered in certificates and newspaper clippings about cases she'd solved. The recording played through a small speaker on her desk, and Michael's voice filled the room with stunning clarity. I love you, Van, he said, the nickname making my stomach turn. I know this has been hard, sneaking around, but I promise it won't be much longer. I just need to make sure the finances are sorted first. Sarah's going to take me to the cleaners if I'm not careful. Vanessa's voice responded, young and breathy. I just want us to be together, Michael, publicly. I'm tired of being your secret. I know, baby, I know. There was a pause, probably him reaching across the table to touch her. You're my priority. I'm going to tell her after the holidays. I'll say I need space, that we've grown apart. She'll be devastated, but Vanessa, you're my future. She's my past. Rita stopped the recording. I sat there, frozen, feeling like all the air had been sucked out of the room. There's more, Rita said gently. Do you want to hear it? I nodded, unable to speak. She hit play again. "What about the money?" Vanessa asked. "Will she take everything?" Michael laughed, actually laughed. "She's entitled to half, but her name's not on some of my accounts. I've been moving assets around for the last few months just to be safe. She's not exactly financially savvy. She won't know where to look." That line did it. That's when the last shred of sympathy I might have had for him evaporated completely. He wasn't just cheating on me. He was planning to defraud me, to steal what was legally mine, to leave me destitute while he started his new life. The betrayal went so much deeper than infidelity. It was calculated, premeditated, and cruel. "I've been tracking those accounts," Rita said, sliding a folder across her desk. "I have a forensic accountant who specializes in hidden assets. With your permission, I'd like to bring him in. This is going to be key to your divorce settlement." Something inside me died that day, listening to that recording in Rita's office. But something else was born. A cold, calculated rage that burned cleaner than any hot anger ever could. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just asked Rita one question. "Can you get me more?" She smiled. The first real smile I'd seen from her. "I thought you'd never ask." Over the next 3 weeks, while I played the perfect wife, we built a case. I discovered that Vanessa wasn't just a colleague. She was a junior analyst he'd been mentoring, 26 years old to my 34 to his 37. He'd been using company resources to fund their affair, charging romantic dinners as client entertainment, using the corporate card for hotel rooms. Rita's forensic accountant, a meticulous man named Howard Lee, discovered even more. Michael had opened accounts in his mother's name, transferred company stocks, and had been skimming money from our joint savings for months. "He's been planning this for at least a year," Howard told me during a meeting at Rita's office. "Look at this timeline, small transfers that accelerate over time. He's been building an escape fund." The paper trail was damning. Every transaction, every transfer, every hidden account was documented in the thick folder Howard presented. "The good news," he said, adjusting his glasses, "is that this gives you significant leverage. Not only is he committing marital fraud, but he's also likely violating securities regulations and his company's ethics policies. This could cost him his job." "Good," I said, surprising myself with the venom in my voice. Rita and Howard exchanged a glance. "I want him to lose everything, just like he planned for me." The masquerade nearly broke me. Every morning I'd kiss him goodbye, pack his lunch, ask about his day. Every night I'd listen to him talk about work, knowing he was describing time spent with her. The psychological dissonance was like living in two realities simultaneously. But I had a plan, and that plan required patience. I started documenting everything. Photographs of our assets, screenshots of bank accounts, copies of investment statements. I quietly moved half of our savings into an account he didn't know about, justified under the guise of a surprise renovation fund I'd mentioned months earlier. I became meticulous about documentation. Every piece of jewelry, every piece of art, every item of value in our home was photographed and appraised. I made copies of his passport, his birth certificate, our marriage license. I downloaded years of bank statements, credit card bills, tax returns. I created a digital fortress of evidence that would protect me when the bomb finally dropped. There were moments during those weeks when the double life I was leading felt surreal, almost dreamlike. I'd wake up some mornings, and for a split second, everything would feel normal. Then reality would crash back in, and I'd remember that the man sleeping beside me was planning to destroy me financially and emotionally. The cognitive dissonance was staggering. How do you make breakfast for someone you know is your enemy? How do you smile and kiss them goodbye when you're building a case against them? One particularly difficult evening, Michael came home with flowers and announced he'd made reservations at our favorite restaurant to celebrate what he called us. I sat across from him at that intimate table, candlelight flickering between us, and watched him play the role of devoted husband with Oscar-worthy commitment. He talked about our future, about maybe starting a family soon, about growing old together. Every word was a lie, but he delivered them with such conviction that if I hadn't known the truth, I would have believed him completely. "What do you think?" he asked, reaching across the table to take my hand. "Should we start trying for a baby? I think I'm ready to be a dad." The cruelty of that question took my breath away. He was planning to leave me within months, and here he was, dangling the dream of children in front of me like bait. Was he really that sociopathic, or did he just compartmentalize so effectively that he could hold two contradictory realities in his mind simultaneously? "Let's wait a little longer," I managed to say, my throat tight with unshed tears. "I want to make sure we're in the best possible place first." He nodded, squeezed my hand, and smiled that warm smile I'd fallen in love with a decade ago. "You're right. You're always so practical. It's one of the things I love most about you." I excused myself to the bathroom and stood over the sink, gripping the porcelain edges so hard my knuckles turned white. I stared at my reflection and barely recognized the woman looking back. My eyes had a hardness to them now, a calculating quality that had never been there before. This ordeal was changing me at a cellular level, and I wasn't entirely sure I liked who I was becoming. But survival required transformation, and I was determined to survive. When I returned to the table, I found Michael scrolling through his phone with a small smile. He quickly put it away when he saw me, but not before I caught a glimpse of that smile, the private, intimate smile of someone texting with their lover. My husband was texting his mistress while on a date with his wife. The audacity was almost impressive. The strangest part was how easy the deception became. I'd thought lying would feel wrong, that maintaining this facade would be impossible. But every time I smiled at him over breakfast, every time I asked about his day with feigned interest, I felt more powerful. I knew what he was doing, and he had no idea I knew. For the first time in months, I had control. Jessica noticed something was different when we met for lunch at our usual spot in River North. "You seem lighter," she said, studying me across the table, like a weight's been lifted. "Did something happen?" I'd prepared for this question. "I've just been taking better care of myself," I said, which wasn't entirely a lie. "Therapy, yoga, focusing on what I can control." I couldn't tell her the truth, not yet. Jessica and Tom were friends with both of us. I couldn't risk word getting back to Michael before I was ready. "Well, whatever you're doing, keep doing it," Jessica said, sipping her wine. "You look amazing. Michael must be thrilled." If only she knew. Michael was thrilled, but not for the reasons she thought. He was thrilled because he thought he was getting away with it, thought he was brilliant enough to fool me, to steal from me, to build his new life while I remained oblivious. The arrogance of it would have been impressive if it wasn't so infuriating. The close call came on a Wednesday. He came home early, unexpectedly, while I was on the phone with Rita in the home office. I heard his key in the lock and had maybe 15 seconds. I shoved the divorce papers Rita had given me into a file marked Interior Design Ideas and switched my phone call to speaker, launching into a fake conversation about fabric swatches. My heart hammered so hard I was certain he could hear it from the hallway. Michael poked his head in, smiled, said he'd forgotten his gym bag. After he left, I sat in that office for 20 minutes, hands trembling, realizing how close I'd come to ruining everything. That night I couldn't eat dinner. My stomach was in knots, adrenaline still coursing through my system from the near miss. Michael noticed. "You okay? You're barely touching your food." "Just a headache," I lied, pushing pasta around my plate. "I think I need to go lie down." "Want me to bring you some Advil?" he asked. The concerned husband, the attentive partner. It was all so convincing. If I didn't know better, I'd believe he actually cared. "No, I'll be fine," I said, escaping to our bedroom. I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, and had a moment of profound clarity. This man I'd loved for 10 years was a stranger. I'd built my life around someone who didn't exist. The Michael I'd fallen in love with, if he'd ever been real, was long gone, replaced by this person who could lie to my face while planning to destroy me. Dr. I Harris helped me process these revelations in our sessions. "You're grieving," she told me. "Not just the relationship, but the person you thought he was, the life you thought you had. That's a profound loss, Sarah. Don't minimize it." "But I'm also angry," I said. "So angry I can barely breathe sometimes." "Anger is healthy," Dr. Harris said. "Anger is what will get you through this. Channel it, use it, let it fuel your strength." I took her advice. Every time I felt weak, every time I wanted to confront him or break down crying, I'd remember that recording. I'd remember him laughing about how financially unsavvy I was, planning to rob me blind. The anger would surge back, cold and clarifying, and I'd steel myself for another day of pretending. The trap was set for our 8th wedding anniversary. I told Michael I wanted to renew our vows at a small ceremony at the Chicago Athletic Association, inviting close friends and family. He seemed genuinely moved by the idea, probably because it gave him cover to continue the affair while maintaining his image as a devoted husband. What he didn't know was that I'd also invited his boss, several of his colleagues, and a process server. I'd coordinated with Rita to have photographers ready. I'd prepared a presentation of evidence that would play on screens instead of our wedding photos. Planning the event was surreal. I worked with a wedding coordinator, selected flowers, chose a menu, picked out music. Everyone thought I was planning a romantic renewal of our vows, a celebration of enduring love. Only Rita, Howard, Dr. Harris, and my attorney knew the truth. I was planning an execution. "Are you sure about this?" my attorney, Margaret Crawford, asked during one of our meetings. She was a shark in the courtroom, known for decimating unfaithful spouses and protecting her clients' assets. "It's going to be very public, very dramatic. You could just serve him privately." "I want it public," I said. "He was planning to humiliate me, to leave me with nothing while he rode off into the sunset with her. He destroyed our marriage in secret. I'm going to end it in front of everyone." Margaret smiled, a sharp, predatory expression. "Then let's make it count." The night of the event arrived. I wore a white dress, had my hair done, smiled for photographs. The venue was beautiful, Art Deco elegance, with Lake Michigan glittering beyond the windows. Michael stood at the front in his tuxedo, looking nervous but happy. I could see Vanessa in the back row, trying to be inconspicuous, probably thinking she was supporting him through this performance. Little did either of them know that the performance was mine. The room was filled with people I'd known for years. My mother, elegant in navy blue, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief, thinking this was a romantic gesture. Michael's mother, beaming with pride at her son. Our friends from the neighborhood, from college, from work. I'd made sure everyone who mattered was there to witness this. The coordinator gave me a nod. It was time. I walked down the aisle to a string quartet playing Pachelbel's Canon, the same song I'd walked down to at our wedding 8 years ago. Michael's eyes were wet with tears. He reached for my hand when I got to the front, and I let him take it, feeling nothing but cold determination. I took the microphone. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate 8 years of marriage," I began, my voice steady. "They say marriage is about trust, commitment, and honesty. So tonight, in the spirit of honesty, I want to share something with you." I clicked the remote, and the first image appeared on the screens. Michael and Vanessa kissing outside the Four Seasons. Gasps rippled through the room, Michael's face drained of color. I clicked again. The credit card statements appeared, line by line, highlighted in yellow. "These are charges my husband made while telling me he was working late." Click. The recording played, his voice filling the room, declaring Vanessa his future and me his past. The silence that followed was deafening. You could have heard a pin drop in that beautiful room. Then, chaos. Michael's boss, Richard Thompson, stood up, his face purple with rage. "You used company funds for this?" His mother started crying. My mother looked like she wanted to murder him with her bare hands. Michael tried to speak, but I cut him off. "I'm not done." I clicked one more time, and the divorce papers appeared on screen. These have already been filed. You'll be served momentarily. Right on cue, the process server approached with documents. The devastation on Michael's face was almost satisfying. Almost. What I felt was closer to vindication, that sharp satisfaction of a well-executed plan. "Sarah, please," Michael stammered, his voice breaking. "This isn't what it looks like." "It's exactly what it looks like," I said into the microphone, my voice echoing through the stunned room. "You've been having an affair with Vanessa for over a year. You've been stealing marital assets and hiding them in secret accounts. You've been using company resources to fund your betrayal. And you've been planning to leave me destitute while you start your new life." Richard Thompson was on his phone, already making calls. I could hear him saying words like immediate termination and ethics violation. Michael's mother was sobbing openly now, her friends trying to console her. My mother had stood up and was walking toward the front, her face a mask of fury. Vanessa tried to leave, but Michael's colleagues blocked the exits, not physically, but with their questions, their accusations. She stood there, makeup running, looking so young and foolish. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But she'd known he was married. She'd participated in the deception. Whatever consequences she faced were of her own making. Michael grabbed my arm as I walked past him toward the exit. "Sarah, please, we can work this out." I looked at him, this man I'd loved for a decade, and felt absolutely nothing. "We already did," I said. "I worked it out. You just lost." I walked out of that venue with my head held high, my mother on one side and Margaret Crawford on the other. Behind me, I could hear the chaos I'd created. People shouting questions, Michael trying to explain, Vanessa crying. I'd spent weeks worrying that I'd feel guilty, that I'd regret the public humiliation. But all I felt was relief. It was over. The lying, the pretending, the constant vigilance. It was finally, blessedly over. "You were magnificent," Margaret said as we climbed into her car. "I've been practicing law for 23 years, and I've never seen anything quite like that." My mother squeezed my hand, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so proud of you, sweetheart. So incredibly proud." We went back to my mother's house, where Rita and Dr. Harris were waiting. They'd watched from the back of the room, making sure everything went according to plan. We sat in my mother's kitchen drinking wine, and for the first time in months, I laughed, really laughed, deep and genuine, until tears ran down my face. "What happens now?" I asked Margaret. "Now we bury him," she said with a smile. "The divorce will be quick given his infidelity and fraud. You'll get the house, at least 60% of assets, possibly more given what he tried to hide, and his career is effectively over. No firm will touch him after this." The fall was swift and brutal. Within a week, Michael was fired from his position for misuse of company resources and violation of the ethics policy regarding relationships with subordinates. The Chicago finance world is smaller than you'd think, and word spread fast. No major firm would touch him. His reputation, everything he'd built his identity around, crumbled like sand. He tried calling, texting, showing up at the house we'd shared. I had the locks changed and communicated only through my attorney. The divorce was finalized in 6 months. I got the house, half of everything, and his retirement accounts took a significant hit for his infidelity. The legal proceedings were brutal for him, straightforward for me. Every time he tried to hide an asset, Howard found it. Every time he tried to claim something as separate property, Margaret demolished his argument. He'd been so confident in his intelligence, so sure he could outmaneuver me, that he'd never considered I might be several steps ahead. During one particularly satisfying deposition, Michael had to admit on record to every affair-related expense, every hidden account, every lie he'd told. His attorney, a slick corporate lawyer clearly out of his depth in family law, tried to paint him as a man who'd made mistakes but deserved compassion. Margaret eviscerated that narrative with surgical precision. "Mr. Mitchell," she said, her voice sharp as a blade, Would you say that opening accounts in your mother's name without her knowledge to hide marital assets was a mistake? Or was it premeditated fraud? I watched him squirm in his chair, his expensive suit unable to hide how much weight he'd lost, the dark circles under his eyes. I was planning for the future, he said weakly. A future without your wife, using money that legally belonged to both of you? Yes. That single-word admission cost him dearly in the final settlement. Vanessa stayed with him, initially. I heard through mutual friends that she thought they'd weather the storm together. But poverty doesn't look good on people accustomed to wealth, and Michael's downward spiral was steep. He went from pulling in $500,000 annually to barely scraping by on contract work. The last I heard before I left Chicago, they were living in a studio apartment in a less desirable neighborhood. Fighting constantly, the fairy tale romance exposed as nothing more than an affair that thrived on secrecy and excitement, but couldn't survive the harsh light of reality. Jessica filled me in during one of our final lunches before I left town. I saw them at Whole Foods, she said, her voice a mixture of pity and schadenfreude. They were arguing in the produce section about whether they could afford organic strawberries. It was uncomfortable to watch. How did he look? I asked, surprised that I still cared enough to wonder. Terrible, Jessica admitted. He's aged 10 years in 6 months, and Vanessa looks miserable. I don't think this is the life she imagined when she was sneaking around with a successful older man. I should have felt satisfied by their suffering, but mostly I just felt tired. Revenge had been sweet in the moment, but it wasn't sustaining. I needed to build something new, not dwell on the ruins of what had been destroyed. As for me, I did something I'd always dreamed about, but never had the courage to do. I moved to Barcelona, just picked up, sold the house, took my settlement money, and bought a small apartment in the Gothic Quarter. For the first 6 months, I just existed. I learned Spanish, walked the narrow medieval streets, sat in cafes watching the Mediterranean, and slowly, piece by piece, put myself back together. It's strange how betrayal can actually set you free. I'd been so focused on being Michael's wife that I'd forgotten who Sarah was. In Barcelona, away from everything familiar, I remembered. The apartment I bought was small but perfect, on the 3rd floor of a building that had stood for 300 years. It had high ceilings with exposed beams, tile floors worn smooth by generations of feet, and a tiny balcony overlooking a narrow street where locals gathered in the evenings. I'd wake up to the sound of the neighborhood coming to life, vendors setting up their stalls in the market, children heading to school, old men discussing politics over cortados. I took intensive Spanish classes at a language school near La Rambla. My classmates were other expats, each with their own story of why they'd landed in Barcelona. A German woman escaping a controlling family, a Brazilian man chasing a dance career, an Australian couple on a gap year that had turned into a gap life. Nobody knew me as Michael's wife. Nobody pitied me or whispered about my scandal. I was just Sarah, an American woman learning to roll her R's and conjugate irregular verbs. The first few months were lonely in a way I'd never experienced. Not the acute pain of heartbreak, but a deeper, quieter solitude that came from being completely unknown in a foreign city. I'd spend entire days speaking to no one but the woman who sold me bread or the waiter who served me coffee. But there was also freedom in that anonymity. I could be whoever I wanted to be. I could reinvent myself from scratch. The language barrier was both frustrating and liberating. When you can't fully express yourself in words, you learn to communicate in other ways. I found myself paying attention to body language, to tone, to the subtle social cues that transcend language. The woman at the bakery, Señora Martinez, didn't speak any English, and my Spanish was rudimentary at best. But she'd smile when she saw me coming, would save me the best croissants, would pat my hand gently when I fumbled with my euros. That small kindness from a stranger meant more to me than I could ever explain. I developed routines that became anchors in my unmoored life. Morning coffee at the same café in Plaza del Pi, where the waiter, Jorge, learned to prepare my cortado exactly how I liked it without me having to ask. Afternoon walks through the Gothic quarter, getting deliberately lost in the labyrinth of medieval streets, then finding my way back using the cathedral spire as my compass. Evening sessions sitting on my balcony, watching the golden hour paint the buildings in shades of amber and honey, listening to the sounds of families gathering for dinner, children playing in the street below. There were hard days, too, days when the loneliness felt crushing, when I'd wake up in my small apartment and feel the weight of being so far from everything familiar. Days when I'd hear American accents in a cafe and feel such an acute homesickness that tears would spring to my eyes. Days when I'd question every decision that had led me here, wondering if I'd made a terrible mistake. I called my mother during one of those dark moments, desperate for connection. "Mom, I don't know if I can do this," I sobbed into the phone. "I don't know anyone here. I don't speak the language. What if I made a huge mistake?" My mother, who'd been my rock through the divorce, listened patiently as I poured out my fears. Then she said something I'll never forget. "Sarah, sweetheart, you've already survived the hardest thing. Everything else is just details. You left behind a life that was killing you slowly. Now you're building one that's authentically yours. That's going to be uncomfortable for a while. That's normal. But don't confuse discomfort with wrongness. You're exactly where you need to be." Her words became a mantra I'd repeat to myself on difficult days. Discomfort isn't wrongness. Growth is supposed to be uncomfortable. I started attending a weekly expat meetup at a bar in Elborn, forcing myself to be social even when I wanted to hide in my apartment. That's where I met people who would become my Barcelona tribe. There was Amélie, a French graphic designer who'd moved to Barcelona to escape a toxic work environment in Paris. Marcus, a British teacher who'd come for a summer and stayed for 5 years. Yuki, a Japanese photographer documenting street art across Europe. None of them knew Sarah Mitchell, the betrayed wife from Chicago. They only knew Sarah, the American woman finding herself in Barcelona. We'd spend evenings sitting at outdoor tables, sharing pictures of sangria, swapping stories about cultural mishaps and language fails. Marcus told a hilarious story about accidentally asking for 12 prostitutes instead of 12 prawns at a restaurant due to a pronunciation error. Amélie described her first Catalan class where she'd confused the words for embarrassed and pregnant, and told the entire class she was pregnant when she just meant to say she was embarrassed about her poor Spanish. These stories, these connections, reminded me that being lost in a foreign place was a shared human experience, not a personal failing. I started painting again, something I'd abandoned after college when I'd gotten serious about being the perfect corporate wife. I set up an easel on my balcony and spent hours trying to capture the play of light on the medieval buildings, the way shadows fell across the narrow streets. My technique was rusty, my paintings terrible at first, but I didn't care. I was creating something that was entirely mine. I met Diego at a language exchange event in Plaza Real. He was an architect, patient and kind, with laugh lines around his eyes and hands that created beautiful things. We started as friends, meeting for coffee to practice our respective languages, and it grew into something unexpected, something real. He knew my story, knew I was broken, and loved me anyway. Not despite my damage, but inclusive of it, scars and all. When I found out I was pregnant, 8 months into our relationship, I was terrified. But Diego just smiled, kissed my hand, and said, "This is the beginning of something beautiful." Our first conversation was halting and awkward. His English was much better than my Spanish, but he insisted we split our time equally between languages. "You learn by struggling," he said with a warm smile. "Too easy, no learning." We talked about architecture, art, the differences between Barcelona and Chicago. He showed me buildings he'd designed, pointing out features with an enthusiasm that made even concrete and steel seem romantic. "A building should tell a story," he said. "It should reflect the people who use it, the landscape it inhabits. Too many architects design for their own ego, not for life." I found myself looking forward to our meetings with an intensity that scared me. I'd sworn off men, sworn-off vulnerability, determined to build a life that didn't require another person to feel complete. But Diego was different from Michael in every conceivable way. Where Michael had been slick and performative, Diego was genuine. Where Michael had hidden his flaws, Diego openly acknowledged his mistakes. Where Michael had made me feel like I needed to be perfect, Diego seemed delighted by my imperfections. "You have paint in your hair," he said one day, reaching across the cafe table to gently extract a streak of cerulean blue from behind my ear. "I was working on a painting this morning," I said, feeling my face heat with embarrassment. "I didn't realize." "Don't apologize," he said. "It's beautiful. It means you were so absorbed in creating that you forgot about everything else. That's a gift." He asked to see my paintings, and I was terrified to show him. He was a trained architect, someone who understood art and design professionally. What if he thought they were terrible? What if he laughed? But he looked at each canvas with serious attention, asking questions about my process, my inspiration, what I was trying to capture. "These are good," he said finally. "Raw, but honest. You paint how you feel, not what you think you should feel. That takes courage." Our friendship deepened over months. He took me to parts of Barcelona tourists never saw, neighborhoods where his friends lived, family restaurants where his name earned warm greetings. I met his mother, a formidable woman who owned a bookshop in Gracia and had strong opinions about everything. She interrogated me in rapid Spanish I struggled to follow until Diego told her to slow down. "I like her," his mother declared finally. "She has sad eyes, but a strong spine. You need someone with a strong spine, Diego. You're too soft." He laughed, kissed her cheek, and told her to stop embarrassing him. But later, as we walked through the lamplit streets, he said, "My mother is right. You are strong, stronger than you know." When our relationship turned romantic, it happened naturally, inevitably, like water finding its level. We were walking along Barceloneta Beach at sunset, talking about our dreams for the future, when he stopped, turned to me and said, "Sarah, I'm falling in love with you. I know you've been hurt. I know you're not looking for this, but I needed you to know." I stood there, waves lapping at our feet, the sky painted in shades of orange and pink, and felt terror and joy in equal measure. "I'm scared," I admitted. "I don't know if I can do this again." "Then we'll go slow," he said, taking my hand. "As slow as you need. I'm not going anywhere." He kept that promise. Our relationship developed at a pace that felt manageable, safe. Unlike with Michael, where I'd rushed headlong into commitment, with Diego I learned to savor each stage. We spent months just holding hands, talking for hours, building a foundation of genuine friendship before adding romance to the mix. The first time he kissed me, we were standing in his apartment looking at architectural blueprints he'd spread across his dining table. He was explaining his vision for a community center in a working-class neighborhood, his hands gesturing enthusiastically as he described how the space would serve multiple functions, bringing people together. I was watching his face, the passion in his eyes, and thinking how different he was from Michael. Michael had been passionate about money, status, advancement. Diego was passionate about creating beautiful, functional spaces that improve people's lives. "Why are you smiling?" he asked, catching me staring. "Because you're you," I said simply. He set down the blueprint he was holding, walked around the table to where I stood, and very gently, giving me every opportunity to pull away, kissed me. It was soft, tentative, asking permission rather than taking for granted. When we pulled apart, I was crying. "Did I do something wrong?" he asked, concerned, wiping a tear from my cheek with his thumb. "No," I said, laughing through the tears. "You did everything right. That's why I'm crying. I didn't know it could be like this." We talked a lot about my past, about Michael, about the trauma I was still processing. Diego never made me feel broken or damaged. He listened without judgment, asked thoughtful questions, and gave me space to feel whatever I needed to feel. When I had panic attacks, triggered by something that reminded me of my marriage, he'd sit with me, reminding me to breathe, grounding me in the present moment. "You're here," he'd say. "You're safe. He can't hurt you anymore. Just breathe with me." One night, about 4 months into our relationship, I woke up from a nightmare about the anniversary event, the moment I'd exposed Michael's betrayal. In the dream, it had gone differently. Michael had turned the crowd against me, convinced them I was crazy, and I'd been the one humiliated. I sat up in bed, drenched in sweat, my heart racing. Diego, who'd been sleeping beside me, woke immediately. Hey, it's okay. You're here. You're in Barcelona. You're safe." I couldn't speak, couldn't catch my breath. He turned on a small lamp, got me a glass of water, sat beside me rubbing my back until my breathing slowed. "Want to talk about it?" he asked. I described the nightmare, and as I did, I realized something. "I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop," I said, "for you to reveal that you're not who you seem, that this is all an act. I keep bracing for betrayal because that's what I learned to expect." Diego took my hands in his. "Sarah, I can't promise I'll never hurt you. People hurt each other sometimes, even when they love each other. But I can promise I'll never betray you. I'll never lie to you. If I'm unhappy, I'll tell you. If something's wrong, we'll talk about it. I won't sneak around behind your back. That's not who I am." "How do I know that's true?" I whispered. "You don't," he said honestly. "You can't know for certain. That's what trust is. It's a choice you make, knowing you could get hurt, but choosing to believe anyway. I can't make that choice for you. Only you can decide if you're ready to trust again." That conversation was a turning point. I realized I had two options. I could let my past with Michael dictate my future, building walls so high that no one could ever hurt me again, but also ensuring I'd never experience real intimacy. Or I could choose to trust Diego, knowing the risk, accepting the vulnerability, and seeing where it led. I chose trust. And slowly, carefully, I let those walls come down. He kept that promise. He let me set the pace, never pushing, never demanding more than I could give. When I had bad days, when the trauma of my marriage bubbled up in anxiety and distrust, he weathered it with patience. When I needed space, he gave it without sulking or guilt-tripping. He showed me what healthy love looked like, and it was nothing like what I'd had before. When I found out I was pregnant, I was 8 months into our relationship and utterly terrified. I took 3 tests, then a 4th, unable to believe the results. I'd always wanted children, but I'd assumed that door had closed. I was 35, single in a foreign country, barely fluent in the language. How could I possibly do this? I told Diego in his apartment. A beautiful space in Elborn, filled with books and architectural models. He was cooking dinner, something with chickpeas and spinach, and I blurted it out with no preamble. "I'm pregnant." He put down the wooden spoon, turned off the stove, and came to where I was standing, frozen in the doorway. "How do you feel?" he asked, searching my face. "Terrified," I admitted. "I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if we're ready." Diego smiled, the most beautiful smile I'd ever seen, and kissed my hand. "This is the beginning of something beautiful," he said. "If you want it to be. But Sarah, it's your choice. Whatever you decide, I support you." His unconditional support, his refusal to pressure me, made the decision clear. I wanted this. I wanted him. I wanted the family we could build together, messy and imperfect and real. That's when I saw the wedding announcement. Michael and Vanessa, finally married, 3 years after my divorce, looking radiantly happy in professional photographs that probably cost more than they could afford. The woman he swore was nothing had become his wife. Part of me wanted to feel vindicated that they'd stayed together, proving I'd been right all along. But mostly, I felt nothing. They were characters in a story I'd finished reading. My life had moved so far beyond them that their choices felt irrelevant. I showed the announcement to Diego, who looked at the photo with mild curiosity. "This is him? Your ex-husband?" "Yes," I said, studying Michael's face in the photo. He looked older, the stress of the last few years visible in the lines around his eyes. Vanessa looked young and hopeful, her white dress probably bought on sale, her bouquet modest. The wedding appeared to be in someone's backyard, not the lavish affair Michael would have wanted when he had money. "Do you still have feelings for him?" Diego asked, his voice neutral, giving me space to be honest. "No," I said, and realized it was completely true. "I feel nothing. It's like looking at a stranger." "Good," Diego said, pulling me close, "because you deserve to feel everything for someone who deserves you. Now here's what I learned from this whole nightmare, and I want you to really hear this because it might save you from your own version of my story. Financial infidelity often precedes physical infidelity. When someone starts hiding purchases, creating secret accounts, or being defensive about money, dig deeper. Gaslighting makes you doubt your perception of reality. If you find yourself constantly questioning your instincts, if you're being told you're crazy or paranoid when you raise legitimate concerns, trust yourself, not them. Document everything. I can't stress this enough. Screenshots, photographs, dates, times, everything. You think you'll remember, but emotional trauma clouds memory. Having concrete evidence saved me legally and financially. Also, understand that affairs thrive in fantasy. Michael and Vanessa's relationship was exciting because it was forbidden. Once it became reality, with bills and responsibilities and everyday life, the shine wore off. That's not to say they can't be happy, but the statistics aren't in their favor. Studies show that marriages that begin as affairs have a significantly higher divorce rate. The foundation is rotten from the start. Most importantly, betrayal like this doesn't define you. It reveals character, both theirs and yours. Michael's choices showed me who he really was, someone willing to trade integrity for excitement, commitment for novelty. My response showed me who I was, someone stronger than I'd ever known, capable of surviving devastation and building something beautiful from the ruins. I want to add something else I learned, something Dr. Harris told me that stuck with me through everything. Healing isn't linear, she said during one of our sessions. You'll have good days and terrible days. You'll think you're over it, and then something will trigger you and you'll feel like you're back at square one. That's normal. That's part of the process. Be patient with yourself. She was right. Even now, years later and genuinely happy, I sometimes have moments where the betrayal hits me fresh. I'll see a couple holding hands and wonder if they're cheating on their spouses. I'll hear a story about infidelity and feel my chest tighten with remembered pain. The trauma doesn't disappear completely. You just learn to carry it differently. But I also learned that I'm capable of more than I ever imagined. I learned that I can survive in a foreign country without speaking the language. I can build a new life from scratch. I can trust again, love again, hope again. Michael didn't break me, even though he tried. He freed me from a life I'd outgrown without realizing it. I think about the woman I was in that Chicago brownstone, so focused on being the perfect wife that I'd lost myself entirely. I don't miss her, even though my life looked easier then. That Sarah was living a lie. This Sarah, standing on a balcony in Barcelona with a baby growing inside her, is living the truth. And truth, even when it's messy and complicated, is always better than the most beautiful lie. Sometimes people ask me if I regret the way I exposed Michael, if the public humiliation was too cruel. Here's what I tell them. He planned to humiliate me financially and emotionally. He planned to steal from me, to leave me destitute, to paint me as the problem while he rode off into the sunset with his mistress. I simply exposed his actions publicly rather than letting him control the narrative. Was it dramatic? Absolutely. Was it vindictive? Probably. But was it also the moment I took back my power after months of being gaslit and manipulated? Definitely. Would I do it again? In a heartbeat. Not because I believe in revenge, but because I believe in accountability. Michael needed to face consequences for his actions, not just to me, but to his employer, whose resources he'd stolen, to his colleagues, whose trust he'd violated. The public exposure ensured he couldn't talk his way out of it, couldn't charm and manipulate his way back into a position where he could hurt others. I've heard through the grapevine that Vanessa left him about a year after they got married. Apparently, once the excitement of the affair wore off and she was left with a man who was broke, unemployed, and bitter, the romance faded fast. Last I heard, Michael was working in insurance sales, a far cry from his high-flying finance days. His mother apparently still speaks to him, but their relationship is strained. She lost friends over his actions, felt humiliated by the public scandal. Do I feel sorry for him? No. Sympathy requires me to believe someone didn't deserve their fate. Michael orchestrated his own downfall with deliberate, calculated choices. He could have been honest with me. He could have asked for a divorce before starting an affair. He could have divided our assets fairly. Instead, he chose deception, theft, and betrayal. He's living with the consequences of those choices. What I do feel is grateful. Grateful that I discovered the truth before he could successfully steal from me. Grateful that I had the resources and support to fight back. Grateful that I didn't waste more years on a lie. Grateful that his betrayal forced me to rebuild a life that's actually mine. The pregnancy has given me time to reflect on what I want to teach this child about relationships, trust, and self-worth. I want them to know that love shouldn't make you smaller, shouldn't require you to ignore your instincts, shouldn't feel like walking on eggshells. I want them to understand the difference between healthy conflict and toxic manipulation. I want them to see, through Diego's example and mine, what partnership looks like when it's built on honesty and mutual respect. Diego and I talk about this often, late at night when the baby is particularly active and sleep is elusive. "What will we tell them about your ex-husband?" he asked me recently. "When they're old enough to ask?" I thought about that question carefully. "We'll tell them the truth," I said. "Age-appropriate truth. We'll tell them that I was married before, that it ended badly, but that it led me here, to you, to our family. We'll teach them to trust their instincts, to never ignore red flags, to value themselves enough to walk away from situations that diminish them." "And if they judge you for the way you exposed him?" Diego asked. I smiled. "Then we'll have raised a child with a strong moral compass who thinks for themselves. I can live with being judged if it means they're thinking critically about right and wrong. I'll explain my reasoning, and they can decide for themselves if they would have done differently." So I'm sitting here in Barcelona, 8 months pregnant, watching the sun set over the Mediterranean, with a man who loves me authentically, building a life I actually chose instead of one I defaulted into. Michael and Vanessa are welcome to their happiness. I found mine by losing everything I thought I needed. The baby kicks, a strong flutter against my ribs, and Diego comes out onto the balcony with 2 cups of tea. He sets them down and wraps his arms around me from behind, his hands resting on my belly. "What are you thinking about?" he asks. "The past," I admit, "and how grateful I am that it's past." "Me too," he says, and kisses the top of my head. "Me too." We stand there as the sun sinks into the sea, painting the sky in impossible shades of orange and purple and pink. Somewhere in Chicago, Michael and Vanessa are living their life. Maybe they're happy, maybe they're not. It doesn't matter anymore. Their story is theirs. Mine is here, in this moment, with this man, in this city I've come to love. And I wouldn't trade it for anything. Before I close this chapter, I want to share some practical advice for anyone going through something similar, because when I was in the thick of it, I desperately wished someone had given me this roadmap. First, trust your gut before you trust explanations. If something feels off, it probably is. Your instincts have evolved over thousands of years to protect you. Don't let someone talk you out of what your body is telling you. When I first saw that text message, every cell in my body screamed that something was wrong. I let Michael's smooth explanation override that instinct, and it cost me weeks of continuing to live a lie. Second, document everything from the moment you suspect something. I can't emphasize this enough. Take screenshots with timestamps. Photograph financial documents. Keep a journal with dates, times, and details of suspicious behavior. Create a separate email account that your partner doesn't know about, and forward everything there. Back it up to the cloud. When you're in the emotional turmoil of betrayal, your memory becomes unreliable. Documentation becomes your truth anchor. Third, don't confront until you have a plan. My first instinct when I found that text message was to immediately demand answers, to cry and scream and force a confrontation. If I had done that, Michael would have gone even further underground, and I never would have discovered the financial fraud. Rita taught me that patience is power. Gather your evidence, build your case, consult with professionals, then strike when you're ready, not when you're emotional. Fourth, build your team in secret. I had Rita, Howard, Dr. Harris, and Margaret Crawford all working on my behalf before Michael knew anything was wrong. This team protected my interests, supported my mental health, and ensured I wasn't making impulsive decisions based on hurt feelings. You can't do this alone, but you have to be strategic about who you trust. I didn't tell my friends until after everything went down because I knew they were friends with both of us, and I couldn't risk information getting back to Michael. Fifth, protect your finances immediately. The day I hired Rita, I should have moved money. I waited too long, and it's only because Michael was confident I'd never suspect anything that I was able to eventually secure our joint savings. Open an account at a different bank under just your name. If you're a stay-at-home spouse with no income, start documenting every contribution you make to the household because that has monetary value in divorce proceedings. Keep copies of tax returns, investment statements, property deeds, everything. Sixth, understand that gaslighting is a deliberate tactic. When Michael made me feel crazy for suspecting him, when he became extra loving and attentive, when he suggested I was the one with problems, that was calculated manipulation designed to make me doubt my reality. Recognize these tactics for what they are. Abuse. Someone who genuinely loves you doesn't make you feel insane for having legitimate concerns. Seventh, know that you don't owe anyone an explanation for how you choose to exit a toxic situation. Some people thought my public exposure of Michael was too harsh, that I should have just quietly divorced him. Those people didn't live through months of gaslighting, didn't discover their spouse was planning financial fraud, didn't have to smile and play pretend while gathering evidence. You do what you need to do to survive and protect yourself. Other people's opinions of your choices are none of your business. Eighth, therapy is not optional, it's essential. Dr. Harris saved my sanity during those dark weeks. She helped me process trauma in real time, gave me tools to manage my anxiety, and validated my experiences when I was being made to feel crazy. Find a therapist who specializes in betrayal trauma. This is a specific kind of psychological injury that requires specialized treatment. Ninth, understand the legal system and use it. I got lucky with Margaret Crawford, but I had to be my own advocate too. I educated myself on divorce law in Illinois, understood what I was entitled to, knew my rights. The legal system can protect you, but only if you understand how to use it. Many states have laws about dissipation of marital assets, meaning if your spouse is hiding money or spending it on an affair, you can be awarded more in the divorce. But you have to prove it, which circles back to documentation. 10th, accept that healing isn't linear and some scars are permanent. 3 years later, I still have triggers. I still sometimes have nightmares. I still feel a spike of anxiety when Diego is late coming home or doesn't answer his phone immediately. Trauma changes your brain chemistry. It's not something you just get over. You learn to live with it, to manage it, to not let it control your life. But pretending you're completely healed when you're not just sets you up for disappointment. Finally, understand that the best revenge really is living well. All the satisfaction I felt from publicly exposing Michael faded within weeks. What has brought me lasting peace is this life I've built. The revenge that endures is happiness. It's waking up every morning in a home you chose, in a city you love, with a partner who respects you. It's rebuilding your sense of self. It's discovering you're stronger and more capable than you ever imagined. And here's something else I learned that I wish someone had told me earlier. You don't have to forgive to move forward. There's this cultural narrative that forgiveness is necessary for healing, that holding on to anger makes you bitter. I call nonsense on that. I haven't forgiven Michael, and I don't plan to. What he did was unforgivable. But I have released him from taking up space in my head. I've moved forward without forgiveness, and I'm thriving. You don't owe your betrayer forgiveness. You owe yourself peace. And those are two very different things. The baby kicks again, stronger this time, and I laugh, placing my hand over the spot. This little person, this new life that came from genuine love and mutual respect, is proof that betrayal doesn't get the last word, that endings can be beginnings, that sometimes you have to lose everything to find what you were actually looking for all along. I want to hear from you. What city or time zone are you listening from? Have you ever had to rebuild after betrayal? What would you have done in my situation? Would you have exposed your partner publicly, or would you have taken a different route? Drop a comment below. If you think I handled this right, or even if you think I was too harsh, give this video a like. Your engagement helps other people who need this story find it. And please, if you know someone who needs to hear this story, someone who's doubting their instincts or justifying behavior they know is wrong, someone who's being gaslit or manipulated, share it with them. Sometimes we need to hear someone else's story to find the courage to write our own ending. Sometimes we need to see that survival is possible, that rebuilding is possible, that happiness after devastation is not just a fantasy, but an achievable reality. Hit subscribe because I've got more stories to share. Stories of women and men who refuse to let betrayal be the final chapter. There are 2 other videos I think you'll love. One about financial recovery after divorce, and another about recognizing narcissistic patterns in relationships. They should be popping up on your screen right now. Until the next story, protect your peace, trust your instincts, and remember that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the catalyst for the best thing you ever do for yourself. Take care of your heart, because you're the only one who truly can. Remember that you're stronger than you think, braver than you believe, and deserving of love that doesn't require you to shrink yourself to fit someone else's narrative. Your story isn't over. This is just a chapter, and you get to write what comes next.